Hello everyone and welcome back to Closets Gaming. Today I'm trying something new, as you can see. I'm going to try to read out an article, talk about it, and figure out whether I agree with it or whether I disagree with it. This article, titled "Why Are Game Companies So Afraid of the Politics in Their Games?" is from Polygon.com. Was made by Colin Campbell on the 20th. It's not the newest thing, I know, but bear with me. I haven't read the article yet, so let's actually delve right into it and see what it has in store for us. So why are game companies so afraid of politics in their games? Social issues are profitable. They just don't want to talk about it. So straight off the bat, the title. I really don't think gaming companies are afraid of politics in their games. I've seen plenty of games that delve with highly politicized topics, but let's see what exactly the author has to say about this. Game publishers are lathering their productions with the stark imagery of modern political divisions, while at the same time denying any topical intent. Okay, so he's saying he sees politics in games, but the companies are denying that they're political. Okay, that could be an certainly interesting topic to talk about. Their strategy, according to the industry sources ranging from developers to publicists, is to profit from emotive social divisions while ducking difficult conversations about their works might signify. Their games garner publicity and sense of cultural relevance, but the companies avoid the challenge and expense of controversy. Is that really surprising that companies don't want to get into controversial topics? Their goal of companies is to make profit. I really don't think it's that surprising that they would want to avoid controversy. I'm starting to feel that maybe this guy has sort of a political agenda, but let's see, maybe he redeems himself. In the words of one senior game industry publicist I spoke to under conditions of anonymity, it's bullshit. They want to have their cake and eat it too. Sounds like your typical political statement these days. They want to have their cake and eat it too. And I really hate that, because you cannot have both. But we'll see, maybe they have a point. In the past few years, we've seen repeated examples of the quasi-political AAA game. Okay. Deus Ex Mankind Divided posited a world of cybernetic enhancement divided by a mechanical apartheid by publisher Square Enix repeatedly denied that its imagery of social separation and prison camps had anything to do with the real world of racial divisions. And does it have to? Does it have to necessarily be inspired by real world stuff? And you might be like, oh, obviously that's what their intention was, but maybe not. Maybe they just wanted to make a game about a story that they found interesting. And everything has to be connected to real world politics, you know. But okay, I can see the mechanical apartheid, as you call it, in Deus Ex Mankind Divided, being somewhat similar to real world apartheid and prison camps and similar things. Yeah, I can somewhat see that. Okay. Far Cry 5 portrayed a rural, anti-government American cult in which bastardized crosses were wielded by fanatics, but publisher Ubisoft refused to be drawn on an obvious comparison with currently resurgent white supremacist groups. So first of all, I don't think white supremacist groups are really resurging as much as especially American left-wing journalists seem to think. And I know I live in Europe, so I probably don't have the full picture. But from what I see happening around the world, what I see in the news, and I do read the news, and I do read both left-wing and right-wing news, because I think that's, these days, the only way to actually get a balanced news diet. I really don't think it's as bad of a thing as you really seem to postulate. It's just not that bad. And yes, there are a few white supremacist groups, but those have been there probably ever since your country was created. And saying that they are resurging is a thing I don't agree with here. I think they always existed, but you're just making a big deal out of them, and thus giving them power. And that's probably the worst thing. You're giving them power, enabling them to recruit new members. And I'm fully against white supremacy. I'm fully against any kind of supremacy. But if you give them media attention, then people who might be inclined to join them will suddenly know where to look for them. And until that point where you give them media coverage, they really didn't know such groups maybe even existed. And thus they were felt alone, and there was a bigger chance that they would reform themselves. Because if you don't have people who agree with you, then you start doubting yourself. But if you show them, oh, look, there's another group of people who just think exactly like you, maybe even worse, they will go and seek them out. And suddenly their worldview will feel like it's a real thing because others agree with it. So you always have to be very, very careful with to whom you give media attention. And again, when it comes to the game Far Cry 5, I think it was just a game about religious fanatics that was set in the USA. I don't think they were inspired by white supremacist groups that you claim are resurging in the US. Again, I just think they wanted to make a game with a cool story. Okay, let's look at the third one. Sony's Detroit Become Human flirts with issues like social justice and domestic abuse, but its creator David Cage says really about androids, further claiming that the real world parallels in his work are merely in the eyes of players. Have you even considered the fact that really you're just putting your own political views into games? Maybe the creators didn't have that intention, and maybe their intention was for the game to be political, but it also maybe was for every single person to find its own political statement in the game. People from left wing, and from the right wing, and from the center, and from the authoritarian part of the spectrum, and from the libertarian part of the spectrum. Maybe it was just set up in a way that everyone can find their own things. And because you're a person of pretty obviously left-leaning political views, you're seeing the lefty stuff. You're not seeing the right-wing stuff in the games. And I can almost guarantee that if you notice the right-wing stuff in the game, you would be just in a rage. You would be so angry. Okay, and what do you have here as last as an example? At EA last week, Ubisoft heavily publicized The Division 2. Set in Washington, D.C. in the near future, the game asks players to fight back against a corrupt government and help save the United States from tyrants. Despite obvious parallels with the current political landscape in the United States, Ubisoft continues to deny any real-world inference, even in the face of incredulity. I don't know that word. What does that word mean? Let me quickly just search for that word so I know what it means. You need to remember, I'm not a native speaker. The state of being unwilling or unable to believe something. Okay. Oh, sorry. I clicked on a link. So let me start in the middle. Despite obvious parallels with the current political landscape in the United States, and that needs to be taken into context, fighting back against a corrupt government and help save the United States from tyrants. Do you really think that the current government of the United States is a tyrannical one? Dude, you've never even been close to a tyrannical government in the United States. Not even close. Like, if you were aiming a bow at a target, you would probably hit someone behind you if you said that the United States has a tyrannical government. It's so far away from it. And I do come from a country which actually existed under a tyrannical government for decades. It hasn't happened throughout my life, and I'm very, very thankful for that. But the fact that you people think that Trump's government is tyrannical is just laughable. It's just certainly not the case. You don't have anything close to a tyranny in any sense of the word. And saying that there are parallels between the current political landscape and a game that's about fighting literally with guns in Washington? So what you're saying is that you think there should be a violent revolution. That's your view based on what you wrote here, and that's just wrong. That shouldn't be the case. No, not ever. I'm very happy that my country was one of the few post-communist countries which managed to have a revolution that wasn't bloody. It was so amazing, and it's one of the things I'm very proud about my country. Because in violent revolutions, innocents die. Do you remember that? That innocents die? And I'm hoping you don't want innocents to die. Because from what I'm reading here, you really are advocating or thinking that a violent revolution is the solution to your country's problems. No, your country has so little problems. It's almost unimaginable. Seriously, guys. Take a good look at not only your own government, and I'm not saying your country doesn't have problems with the way it is governed. It certainly does. But go almost anywhere else in the world, and you will realize how good you actually have it. Okay, let's continue with the article. In the aftermath of Polygon's E3 interview with the Division's 2 creative director Terry Spire, Ubisoft was mildly mocked for its determination to avoid taking sides in the midst of a raging culture war. Consumers are starting to take note of the discrepancy between the games they play and the messages they hear coming out of media events like E3. Okay, so let's see what is under this link, widely mocked. Okay, there is a tweet here with 60 retweets and 300 likes. That's nothing on Twitter. And it says, your central character, I love video games and the people who write video games. And that's obviously ironic. And this woman is wearing a hijab and is living in Glasgow, Scotland. Interesting. Your central character here on the key art has an American flag bandana to their backpack. That's correct? This is not a political statement? No, it's not! For fuck's sake, having a flag tied to your backpack when you're in America is not a political statement. Seriously. Like, is the fact that when people put flags on their cars just because, let's say, there is a world championship in football going on, is that a political statement? No, it's not. It's a statement of the fact that you love your country. That's not politics. That's patriotism. Those are two very, very different things. And you don't realize it, and that's the worst thing. Okay. And, yeah, and there's somebody, Uncommon Sense. I love how this is a source for widely mocked, 59 retweets and 293 likes. It has gotten a little bit up, but yeah, this is not a source for widely mocked. Seriously. Seriously not. And what do they have under consumers are taking note of the discrepancy? Oh, another Twitter! AA games often do this thing where they assume by foregrounding the fictional elements of a property they've done some kind of intellectual gymnastics routine to get away from real-world political context. It's always dizzying, stupid, and petulant. This is the same thing. There's this exact same screenshot there. That's just not the thing. Okay, let's continue. Soraya Murray, associate professor of film and digital media department at the University of California, Santa Cruz, said, "Being topical in content is key to being relevant. While these companies may or may not want their games to be thought as political, they probably do want them to be meaningful." Yes, but what is meaningful doesn't have to be political. You realize that, right? You can find meaning in many, many things in the world. Like, I'm not a person who really delves into politics unless I have to, or unless I feel as I have to. But I also find deep meaning within the relationship with my girlfriend. That's certainly not political. I found a deep meaning in cooking a good meal. I do. I truly do. That's certainly not a political statement. Ultimately, companies create games and then release them into a world that shapes a larger context. These games may have intended meanings in their design, but this changes throughout their conception, development, production, circulation, and reception. Context shapes them across time. In other words, a game's company's intent does not solely drive meaning. Okay, let me think about that for a moment. So what he is saying is that the meaning of a game is whatever you give it, whatever the meaning is to you. And I would agree with that. That's a good statement. The problem is he's saying the meaning is political again. And I don't agree with that. There are plenty of games that just don't have any connection to a political statement. Okay, let's continue on in the article. Another publicity source who has worked for multiple large publishers explained the thinking behind the strategy. It's about money. Well, duh! They're companies. They have to make money. That's their primary goal. I understand that you're probably leftists, maybe on the side of pretty hard socialism, and you don't think companies should be making profit. But we do live in a capitalistic society, and thus the primary source for meaning of companies, if you don't mind me using that word, is to make profit. It is literally what they are built to do, to make money. Games with a sense of relevance feel fresh and artistic, but talking about the politics risks blowback, and blowback is expensive. Yes, it is! It is expensive, and thus companies try to avoid it, because again, for them to be fulfilling the thing they need to be fulfilling, they need to make profit. That is the point of companies, or at least big companies. Small companies, let's say a small family firm selling food, may not need to necessarily make a ton of profit. But big-ass publishing houses in the gaming world do certainly need to make a ton of profit, because otherwise we wouldn't get these AAA games. If people weren't buying games, then they wouldn't have the profits and they couldn't funnel them into making new games. Seriously, guys. But towing the line between relevance and controversy is likely to end badly sooner or later, according to Eric Bernstein, an expert in managing publicity crises. Yes, let's actually look at this guy's credentials. I want to see a bit about him. Okay, so Eric spends every day hands-on with crises and reputation management. Throughout years of direct experience, he has developed proven methods to prevent, prepare for, and reduce image from crisis. He worked firsthand. Okay, is there any information on him? Not really. Okay, but yeah, this is true. That is a true statement. Trying to toe the line between controversy and being relevant, in the sense that you're creating political statements, is really dangerous. Because it takes one step up the line, and suddenly you're in the realm of controversy. And that's what companies are trying to avoid. What does he have to say more? The way they handle things is inviting a crisis. It doesn't matter how schooled you are in delivering the message if you don't have the right message to start with, Bernstein said. Perhaps the most common causes of crises is the conflict between expectation and reality, or a conflict between two different messages from the same source. The game is a piece of messaging itself. Yeah, it is. They need to think about the message that the entire game is sending, and their in-person communications need to be on the same page. So if they make a game that to some people appears political, because it doesn't appear political to everyone. You need to remember that. That's just not the case. They need to be saying that it is directly political, making it political in everybody's eyes. No, that is inviting a controversy. Because, believe it or not, plenty, I would say the vast majority of gamers do not give a shit about politics in their games. We play games to have fun. Maybe listen to a cool story. Maybe just chat with our friends and hang out. But most of the time, we don't give a shit about the politics of the game and its potential influence on politics in the real world. Seriously, that's just you. And maybe your friends. But the vast, vast majority of gamers do not give a shit about this. While games tend to take a broadly progressive view of the world, game company marketing departments understand that explicitly stating hostility towards reactionary positions risks an enmity of right-wing media, streamers, and online communities. They fear, above all, finding themselves at the center of a Gamergate-like publicity inferno. And rightfully so. Why do you want them to do controversial stuff? This is what I don't understand. I haven't seen a single mention of the tons of indie games that actually do talk about politics, and that is their intention. You're talking about AAA titles. And AAA titles are equivalent of summer blockbusters. And while, yes, there have been a very few select number of summer blockbusters that managed to talk about political stuff, and do it well, and do not cause a controversy. The point of summer blockbusters is to get people into the cinema, to buy the ticket, to enjoy the movie, and just turn your brain off, forget about the world for a moment, with its politics as well, and enjoy a nice story. And that's also the point of games. Though it's not only about a story, it's also about enjoying a piece of nice gameplay. But again, the point of these games isn't to be political. The point of them is to provide fun to people so they can enjoy their free time. It's not that hard of a concept to grasp, I think. Game developers and publishers that are seeming to be pandering to liberal values have often been targeted by online mobs. Examples demonstrate the obnoxious nature of section of the gaming audience which is convinced that games are being hijacked by a cabal of social justice warriors as a platform for progressive values. And here I have to agree with Arkle. There are online mobs who target these people. But I wouldn't say they are harassing them. I think the mobs, in large, from what I saw, are trying to tell them this is not what we want in our games. And the way you are doing it is so blatantly obvious that it makes us angry. And on the other hand, can you imagine this guy's reaction if there came a game out that would be about the fact that the government took guns away from its citizens and that leads to a big crisis? That would be such a huge shitstorm. And I mean that. It would be one of the largest shitstorms that would ever happen in the gaming media. Or let's say there would be a game that would be about the only guy who is left from a full family. And the rest of the world is just tearing it apart because everybody comes from single parent families. Yeah, and he's the only one that can save the world by bringing back conservative values. again, there would be such a huge shitstorm. You can't even imagine it. So just because currently the game developers and publishers seem to be more on the left side of the political spectrum doesn't mean that it couldn't change one day. And when that day comes, and there is a good chance that one day that day will come, it will be the left people who are attacking these games and attacking their developers and publishers. Don't be mistaken about that. This isn't a thing that happens only on the right. This is a thing that will happen to any political movement, because you will always have idiots on both sides of the political spectrum who think that being jerks to people online or in real world is the solution to their problems. It isn't, I know, and I agree with you that being just a jerk to game developers and publishers is a bad thing, but that doesn't mean they do not have the right to talk about their opinions. So you trying to say that is bad and they shouldn't do it is also wrong. They have the right to do it, and you need to understand that. Nintendo's decision to localize Xenoblade Chronicles X, taking out customization slider that altered female breast side, sparked harassment and doxing against a Nintendo employee, and that's obviously bad. But to be honest, a slider that alters female breast size seems like a thing that the left would be more enraged about these days. Battlefield 5 use a woman character in a World War II setting has caused untold controversy among reactionaries. No, it wasn't among reactionaries. I personally don't give a fuck whether there's a woman in Battlefield 5, but people who care about historical accuracy might care, because, let's face it, it's just not the case that there were women on the front lines of the Western front line of World War II. There were some among the Russians, some among the Finnish, let's say, but Americans and the British really didn't use them as soldiers, and they maybe care about historical accuracy. Have you even considered that to be the case? And you're just going to be, oh no, they just hate women. No, they care about accurate history. Deal with it. Some people do care about accurate history. Maybe you don't, but some people do. So even when game companies make relatively straightforward decisions to reflect broad social norms, they can expect trouble. It says something that a company like Bethesda has to deal with controversy for portraying fictional American Nazis as bad guys, while adding the spineless caveat, Bethesda doesn't develop games to make specific statements or incite political discussions. And is it wrong that Bethesda doesn't make games about politics? Is that wrong? Is that wrong in your opinion? Then you're an idiot. Game companies, even the big ones, have the right to say to you what their games are about, if they are still around. I know you live in a world where anybody can find their own meaning in anything. But if the author has a meaning in mind and he tells you what it is, then that is the meaning of the freaking game. According to PR sources, the hard cost of media controversy can run into 7 figures. Yeah, that's a ton of money, and I'm going to say it's probably going to be higher. As crisis management companies are called in, expensive monitoring software is deployed, and staff are required to respond to social media messages and online message boards. Yeah, and that's only the beginning. And yeah, he actually talks about it, so let's read it. But there are other costs. Investors dislike controversy and are prone to flee. CEOs of game companies that are owned by massive non-gaming corporations are rarely keen to explain negative headlines to their bosses. Staff morale can take a massive hit from waves of internet fury. Yeah, and that is actually where the cost comes in. If your company seems to be causing a lot of controversy, investors will not invest their money into your company, thus lowering its value, giving you less cash flow, allowing you to make less great games. That That's just pretty obvious. Why deal with it? Said a game industry source. It's easier just to take the line that the work is open to many interpretations and that it isn't taking sides, even when it has something to say. For fuck's sake, how is it about many interpretations? They're literally telling you your interpretation is wrong. That's what they're literally telling you. Literally here. Bethesda doesn't develop games to make a specific statement or incite political discussions. So it's not about politics, and you're still putting politics in. That's the complete opposite of what they are fucking saying. Individual game companies have their own structures and ways of funneling decisions between management, development, marketing, and PR departments. But they all have CEOs who drive strategy. Decisions to embrace political themes are taken at the top. So you're saying that CEOs just need to say, we are going to push politics into our games. What if they don't want to? Are they required to? Are they required to? Just because you want them to? No, they aren't. They have the right to make their own decisions. If the CEO and the board don't know this is happening, they aren't doing their job, said one PR source. In some companies, the decision to exploit and conceal political intent in PR campaigns is taken at the top level. But more usually, it comes out of discussions with marketing teams. So, again, is that wrong? Is it wrong for the CEO or a company broadly just to go to the marketing department and say, so we want to sell as many copies of this game as we can. How can we do that? And the marketing department says, well, maybe this thing would be controversial and thus limit the amount of sales we can make. And the CEO says, okay, we'll take it out because we need to make as much money as we can. And this, again, comes back to the thing that you don't seem to understand the fact that companies are here to make profit. That really is their intended goal, to make profit. And to do that, they need to get as wide of an audience as they can get. And the way to do that is to avoid controversy. There are debates going on internally at one source. Some voices are stating that they should honestly embrace the themes that the games explore. I know a lot of people really don't like coming out with these phony, inauthentic messages. They want to say, yes, this is an important issue, and here's our take on it. But they shout it down by the status quo. It's seen as too risky. Because it is. It is. Take a look at the loot box controversy that happened to EA. It lowered the value of the company by $3 billion. And that wasn't even a political controversy. Really, it is risky because they could go into some serious problems. And I know you don't give a shit about the fact that the companies could go down under, but they do. Another source said, publishers like to think of themselves as being entertainment companies, like movie studios, but they behave like old school game companies. They are comfortable communicating with an audience that sees their products as just fun. Because that is the point for the majority of the gamers. But that is not sustainable. But it is. It really is. As the vast majority of gamers do only care about having fun with their games. Caring about fun in your games is highly sustainable. The next generation of leaders will understand this and things will change. No, I don't think so. I really doubt it. I think this is because you're coming from a bubble of people who care about these things as much as you do. But the vast majority of people, especially actually in the technological departments, do not give a shit about it. For the moment, games that take an openly political stand tend to be independent rather than big budget productions. Yes, finally you're talking about indie games. And that is where political statements actually, I think, should be. The same way as it is in movies. Highly political movies are little independent movies. It's not the big summer blockbusters, no matter how much you seem to put in politics into summer blockbusters, because you just think, oh, that had to be a political statement. No, probably not. Probably was just cool for the story. Christian Miller at Hawaii, I'm always suck at saying, I don't know how to say Hawaii. Based developer who released Neofeud, which melts politics and social issues in a cyberpunk world. He says, the way big companies address divisive issues is a little silly. It's like they don't want to have any opinions about anything ever. They want to say, we're just making fun entertainment. And that's wrong? It is wrong for companies to make fun? To make something that gives you a chance to have a bit of fun? That's not wrong. That's actually a great, awesome thing. Because we humans, we desperately want to have fun. And it's disingenuous. No, it's not. That maybe truly is their goal. And if you want to make a political game, go right ahead. More power to you. But don't say that others have to do the same as you. Because they don't. They just don't have to. I know that they need to reach a wide demographic. Yeah, they do, and that's why they fucking avoid controversies. They need to get to the lowest common denominator, Miller added. But even big movies are able to tackle these issues. The games companies need to move on. No, big movies that try to tackle these issues do face significant blowback. Take a look at Han Solo. That probably didn't even make its money back. It probably was like something like $50 million to $100 million in a loss. And if publishers went this route, they would go down under. Truly, they would. If they just implemented politics into every game. And that is the reason why they don't do it. Maybe your game development had like, I know, it costed you, let's just use a nice round number of $100,000. And you were selling it for $10. Thus you needed to sell 10,000 copies if, let's say, Steam didn't take any cut and etc. etc. Let's just make it simple. Then you needed to sell only 10,000 copies to make a profit. Now let me open a calculator. Let's say the development of a really good AAA game costs something around, now let's say it's a smaller AAA game, let's say it's $100 million. And it's being sold, because it's a smaller game, at $40. They need to sell 2.5 million copies of the game to make their money's worth. That's just so different. And you saying, oh, I can make a political game because I only need to sell, let's say even you need to sell 100,000 copies. That's still 25 times less than they need to sell. You realize that, right? Big budget movies like Black Panther embrace difficult messages in content and in external messaging. If its director Ryan Coogler and publisher Walt Disney Studios had tried to pretend it was just a story about an African king rather than a reflection of societal and historical wrongs, he would rightly have been mocked. How was it a reflection of societal and historical wrongs? How? I haven't seen anything like that movie. The movie was good. I enjoyed it. But it was a story about a successful xenophobic country that was light years ahead in terms of technology compared to the rest of the world. For centuries, it did nothing to help anyone near it. How is that relevant to anything in the current world? Seriously. How? Tell me how. Yet this is precisely the tack taken by video game publishers supported by a vocal minority of consumers and even critics who want games to remain as meaningless mechanical pastimes. They say that too much is being read into these games. No, this is not a vocal minority. You are the vocal minority that wants to see politics in their games. Yes, then there is a vocal minority of people who say politics should not appear in games at all. And there is another vocal minority who says we should see right-wing opinions in video games. But the vast, silent majority doesn't give a single fuck about politics in games, and they only want them to be fun. Seriously. The vast majority of people don't give a shit. No one would even ask those kinds of questions about other media forms or suggest that deep readings are illegitimate pursuits, said UC Santa Cruz Soraya Murray, who is the author of the book titled On Video Games, The Visual Politics of Race, Gender, and Space. Okay, once you say of race, gender, you lost me. I don't give a fuck about race. I don't give a fuck about gender. You're the ones who give a fuck about it. You're the ones who are racists. You're the ones who are concerned about being either misogynistic or misandric. I don't give a fuck whether I'm playing a game with a woman. I don't give a fuck whether I'm playing a game which has a black man as his main protagonist. You're the ones who care about these things. You need to learn that you are the ones who care, not the rest of the world. While video games are distinct from cinema, television, music, and theater, they are still media forms. Being newer, games lack a fully formed critical apparatus. But games are not only entertainment products, they're also culture. It's only recently that we are beginning to have a language for talking about video games as culture. Okay, that's fine. But culture, again, doesn't mean politics necessarily. It doesn't. And the fact that you confuse these two very different terms shows me just how much you don't understand about your typical video gamer. It's a language that game companies are yet to fully embrace. Like in other entertainment media, games do not have to answer to powerful critics. No, they don't. They probably have to answer to more powerful critics than you can imagine. Just because they are in your so-called specific journals, that doesn't mean they don't have to answer to critics. But the critics still care about the games, not about politics of the games. That is the only difference. To powerful critics with wide readership in high-value media outlets. And this is the problem. High-value media outlets. What do you mean by this? Is the stuff that you personally read. Like, let's say, The Times. Or The New Yorker. Or any of these things. Things that you consider to have high value. But we gamers, we have other high-value media outlets. For example, one of them for me is YouTube. It is. Because if I want to know about a game, and I want to consider buying it, I go on YouTube and watch some of my favorite critics, the people I know will tell me exactly the things I need to hear to make an educated decision whether I want to buy the game. My favorite one was Total Biscuit, but sadly he has recently passed away. I'm still deciding who will be my new favorite one. Angry Joe is one of the top ones for me. But that doesn't mean we don't have good quality critics. They just aren't part of your culture. They're a part of our culture. We don't need to buy magazines. We just watch reviews on YouTube. This is changing as gaming critics expand their horizons beyond value for money or absurd playability metrics. Why is this in quotes? Why is this absurd playability metrics in quotes? That is the most important thing about a game, whether it's fun to play. If a game isn't fun to play, I will not play it, no matter what its political statement is. If I'm not having fun playing it, I will not play it. And that goes for the vast, vast majority of gamers out there. Game publishers are facing a new ways of public discussing their products. Yes, by you, but nobody else. Only you care about this. Only the left cares about politics and games at the moment, to an extent that it is actually publicly visible. Some of the centrist and right-wing people care about the fact that you're trying to politicize it, but we are not the ones politicizing it. You are the ones. You're pushing this political agenda, and we're saying no to it, because that's not what we want. And I honestly believe, and I'm pretty sure it's true, that vast majority of gamers stand on the side that we want our games to be fun, not political. Okay, the Polygon contacted Ubisoft, Square Enix, and Sony for comment on the story, but has received a reply. That makes sense. In the meantime, spare a thought for the people who are actually tasked with delivering the publisher-mandated pablum that smothers serious discussion about games. No, I won't. From experience, I can tell you that people on the ground, the developers and publicists, usually hate this stuff. One of the sources said. They are not stupid. They know what the games are about. They don't want to repeat these prepared lines over and over again. But they also don't want to get their reputation for being difficult. They want to keep their jobs. No. And you're forgetting one important group of people here. Consumers! The people who actually play and buy the games and thus sustain the gaming industry. It's not only about the game developers. It's not only about you publicists and me technically. It's about the consumers. And our jobs as gaming journalists should be to protect consumers. Should be to protect the people who have least say in the market. And those are the consumers, because they're not the ones creating the games. They're not the ones who can influence games in any significant factor. That's the developers and us journalists. And we should not care about our opinions. We should care about the consumers' opinions. But you seem to have completely forgotten that. You care only about your own political opinion and you want that put into games. No, I said no. It is the consumers who play games for fun that we should advocate for. And I am going to continue doing that as long as I can. Okay. And that is the end. So, in the end, let me give my final thoughts. These people seem to not understand a few fundamental things. Primarily the fact that game companies are there to make money, not to make political statements. They would like to have companies making political statements, but they don't realize that that would compromise the company's primarily reason for existence, to generate profit. Or they don't care about it. And secondly, they're so out of touch with your average consumer. Your average consumer doesn't give a shit about politics in the games. He cares about whether the game is fun, whether it provides him good value for his money, and whether it functions as advertised. That truly is it. Shame on you, Colin. Get him back in touch with regular consumers. Stop just hanging out with your group of friends who all talk about politics all the time, it seems, and just go and talk to people who play games for fun. Maybe then you will understand why you are wrong. With that being said, that's going to be it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please consider giving me a thumbs up here on YouTube, subscribing to the channel, maybe visit my Steam channel and give me an upload there as well, follow the blog, and be sure to come in soon, as I'm probably going to make a Cat and Spirit Let's Play. Maybe you would be interested in that. And see you guys later with more gaming content. Hopefully less political next time.